It's the Catican. Today we tried something we've never done before, actual journalism.
Yes.
Okay, so the main idea of the video is lots of people are talking about JMI, and lots of people don't know if it's a good deal. Actually, almost nobody is saying it's a good deal. Most are saying it's a bad deal. So what we did is we actually looked into it. We actually did something on our show. I say we, Ben looked into it. So we figured that we would do a video where we actually talk about what the JMI deal really is and where its shortfalls could be because we're losing recruits. So, Ben, is the deal good? First question.
Well, I I think I'm maybe the most optimistic person about it. I mean, I went into this expecting to really hate what I saw. The way I thought it worked was something that I really didn't like. And when I finally got the contracts and looked at them, I was happier about some of it. Some of it still have some questions, um, but ultimately, I think I feel. I mean, as people are reacting to what's happening, I feel like I'm the most optimistic and find myself defending it more so than I am agreeing with people being very critical. Uh, I think first it's important to understand what JMI does. They essentially contract with the university, um, in most cases up front, or in the past up front, to purchase the right to produce certain content and sell certain advertising inventory. For example, they produce all of the pre and post game shows, live radio broadcasts, satellite radio. They sell the naming rights to the stadiums. They sell the advertising spots during games. That is the kind of thing that JMI does. That's what they're paying us for when we enter into a contract with them. And we our first contract with them was in 2015. We were actually their first school that they were handling the media rights for. And at the time, it was a super lucrative deal. I think second most lucrative non-TV media rights deal in the country behind Alabama, who had signed one earlier that year with IMG Learfield. So they've paid us tremendously. I mean, I know our brand is great, but I think a lot of people wouldn't expect us to be the second most lucrative brand in the country. So they've paid us very well. Um, and actually, with this one, they're paying us even more. I mean, I think ultimately the bottom line here is that people are saying, especially given the relationship of the people in the athletic department at JMI, this is collusion. maybe Mitch is going to get hired there afterwards. But I don't think this is some sweetheart deal. I think that this is a really, really good deal for the university, and it could be a really, really good deal for university athletics.
Caleb, Ralph, you guys have any general thoughts on the deal?
My general thoughts is apparently there's some nuance. I don't do nuance. I think it's black, white. JMI is screwing us. Now, yeah, I think the main question that everybody is going to end up having is like, why can't they simply pay the best recruits money, right? And like collectives, outside collectives have done, are probably still doing, right? It feels like we're playing by a different set of rules because Mitch helped write the rules, it looks like. Really what it boils down to is we just missed on a recruit who would have been Mark Pope's like highest profile recruit. And it wasn't because of a whiff, it was because of contract language, which is an insane thing to think about with college basketball recruiting anyway. Just like, why is it like that? And then is it something that can be fixed? And I think from like all of the reading of all of the contracts and all the smart people talking about it that aren't me, it looks like it's something that JMI can fix at the negotiation table. They just need to, and they need to do it like quickly, or the PR, especially when expectations are being met with the current roster, the noise is going to get loud. Where do we go from here? Well, there's this bogeyman, and they just lost us a 5-star recruit.
The Fitness Gram Pacer test.
Let's not. I would like to very much so not be sued.
Right, yeah.
So we talked about our general thoughts on it. Can we get into what the deal actually is and what it consists of and who's involved? Just for those who don't know, i.e. me.
So I think that, like I said, we've been in a contractual relationship, we being the university, have been in this relationship with JMI in the past, and they've done the things like buy the media rights, that the radio broadcasts, the leech show, the coaches' websites, that kind of thing. That's standard. JMI does that for a bunch of schools around the country. Learfield does it for a bunch of schools around the country. Totally normal. Where this deal is different is that we have also named JMI as our exclusive provider of NIL services, which I don't know of any other school that has that structure. I think that was definitely a decision made by Mitch with the idea that collectives are going to go by the wayside soon in mind, following new rules from the House settlement, pending legislation. I think all of that was definitely in his mind as he made these decisions, but I don't think that is necessary for this to work. I mean, I don't think that if the SCORE Act doesn't pass, for example, we're necessarily screwed.
So with the House settlement, if that had passed, it would have gotten rid of collectives, but it didn't pass.
Well, the House settlement did get approved. So everything that we were relying on when we made this decision, as far as NCAA rules, happened. It is, collective deals now have to be submitted to the CSC, the College Sports Commission, which is Deloitte, who reviews every deal over $600 to make sure that it's fair market value for a legitimate business purpose. One thing that changed was that initially they were denying every single collective rule or every single collective deal as a rule. They said a collective does not have a legitimate business purpose. This entity only exists to bring schools to or players to your school. And so it's denied. The plaintiffs in that case went back and said, well, this was not our understanding. We thought this would still work, and the court agreed. And so they revised the settlement so that NIL collectives could still meet that valid business purpose prong of this, but their payments would still have to be confirmed as fair market value for whatever, it's legitimate to be supporting the collective, but I can't give you $1 million for a 30-second ad or one signing. And that's kind of the rule change. That wasn't in place before. Before, you could have wildly disproportionate payments for effort. And so that's changed. But only as far as the NCAA rules are concerned. It's now cheating if you do that, but it isn't illegal. If the SCORE Act gets passed, the goal of that is to kind of standardize this on a national scale, make it so states can't have laws that run contrary to this. If you recall, Tennessee tried to have a law saying this stuff was, it was private information. You couldn't force a player to disclose their NIL deals. And that's just not going to work. If you've got states that are going piecemeal and having their own laws that kind of get in the way of enforcement of these rules, then that doesn't work. So the SCORE Act does still serve a purpose here if that passes, or similar legislation, in terms of standardizing these rules nationwide, making it apply to every single state. But cheating is still cheating. NCAA rule says you can't pay a player in excess of their fair market value. You could always hand a player $20. It was just against the rules, and that's the same way now.
So I feel like we should have explained this earlier. Ben is the podcast's resident lawyer, so that is why he's reviewing that for us. So now I think we should move into the part of what. This is going to sound like a very basic question, but I know it's going to have a bunch of details to it. But what is the deal?
What's the deal?
Like, what is the nature of it? How are we, quote unquote, screwed from what people are saying?
So the deal with JMI being our NIL services provider is essentially, instead of where we used to have Club Blue acting as a way to pool money and then use that money essentially as a recruiting mechanism, we can offer you, hey, we've got this amount of money bookmarked for you. Now JMI is kind of doing that role, but JMI is also working with the university partners to bring that money in. And because the whole point of this is to have all of these deals be things that are going to get approved, they do have to be legitimate NIL deals. A local business comes and this is the amount of money that we're going to pay you for an ad spot with whatever player. Where that's scary is that this isn't a role JMI has served in previously. They are very new to this. Whereas collectives have been doing this for half a decade, coaches have been recruiting forever. JMI has been negotiating between these brand deals and student athletes, at least on an exclusive basis, for a matter of months, and only for us. So that's a very new, different thing. And I think that inexperience is showing. There could be other issues that are causing us to have difficulty landing players. And maybe you could say a better coach could recruit the player such that it overcomes whatever financial or contractual issues there are. But at the end of the day, if our only option, because we no longer have a third-party collective, is JMI, and the players don't want to sign the deals that JMI is bringing to the table, that's a problem.
As part of the deal, are they allowed to pursue non-JMI related opportunities?
So per our contract with JMI, yes. Our contract, when we name them our exclusive NIL services provider, it goes out of its way to say this doesn't mean that players can't look outside of us for opportunities. But it does mean that UK as an institution can't bless another company, or another collective, another group to pool money and to provide these NIL services. It likely means that if players were to do go out on their own and find deals. They can't wear UK logos, trademarks, whatever. That's all protected for these JMI deals. And there, there are maybe some positives to doing that. I think that a deal is worth more. If I'm an advertiser and I'm going to pay Trent Noah, well, I want Trent Noah in a UK jersey, and I'm going to pay more for that. So that's good for him. That's good for the university, and that's good for JMI. So pros and cons of that. But the other aspect of that is that's our relationship with JMI. We're saying, as a rule, we aren't prohibiting players from going out and getting their third-party things. However, if JMI is entering into a deal with these players, or JMI and whatever partner is entering into a deal with these players, our relationship doesn't govern what that contract says. And so some of the speculation is that JMI is being too restrictive with their contract language, and players just don't want to sign those contracts. Maybe the money's there, but if you're asking for things other schools aren't asking for, like Polachek and Pilgrim reported, or if you're asking for stuff that they just don't want to agree to, then that's an issue, right? I mean, you've got to recruit them. They need to want to be here. You need to have a compelling financial offer that makes it worth their while and is competitive with other schools. But you also can't have contract language that scares them away either.
With the deals that the players make with JMI, is that like how JMI's is with UK, to where JMI then gets a cut off of that? So where does JMI come into the picture where they're getting their slice of the pie?
So this is one of the things I actually really like about this deal with JMI, right? So they used to give us a little background on the structure of our financial relationship with them. They used to give us a big guaranteed rights fee each year. And then once a certain threshold was made, we'd get 50% of the gross revenue that came in from the things they sell on top of that, which is good. It encourages UK to have a strong brand because you get more, but it's also good for JMI. As they grow the brand and bring in new partners, they get more money too. And ultimately their goal, they're a private business, their goal is to make money. This new deal, the guarantees are much larger. And instead of 50% of gross revenue, we get 80% of net revenue, which I don't know what the difference is going to be here between the gross and the net, but an 80% split sounds a whole lot better than a 50% split. As part of that, and that's speaking entirely of the things that they sell, the radio shows, the advertising, all of that traditional stuff. With the NIL deals, they don't take a cut of that at all out of what the players are getting. So let's use Trent again as an example. If Trent Noah signs $1 million deal with Paul Miller Ford, no idea what the number, all hypothetical. Trent Noah gets $1 million. And that's whatever the deal says he gets, that entire payment goes to Trent Noah, which is great. That's good. That's an easy thing to pitch to your partners. Say, hey, we as JMI, we're helping facilitate this deal. Player gets 100% of it. Fans like to hear that. Players like to hear that. Business partners like to hear that. Awesome. And that's the case for all of the NIL deals that JMI will facilitate. Then the other aspect of this is that in the contract, there's a separate portion of the fee breakdown that describes ancillary NIL activities. And it defines this as fan loyalty programs or other initiatives that aren't those big partner deals directly to players that raise kind of NIL money. Think BBN United, think the successor to Club Blue, which is importantly different in a couple of ways. From that, though, that separate group of ancillary NIL, JMI first takes, there's sort of a waterfall of the money that comes into there. First, before anything else happens, JMI takes what would have been a 20% cut of the NIL agreements. So JMI does get paid but separately. It doesn't come out of what the players get. It comes out of this separate pool that, in theory, fans are donating to. Probably, if we still have the beer or bourbon partner that we had with Club Blue, that would fall under this category. But so first, off the very top of that, JMI takes 20% of all of the NIL deals that they negotiated. Secondly, JMI recovers all of their costs associated with those NIL deals, their salaries, their commissions, their paperwork, all of the expenses that they incurred in those deals get covered here. And then third, after that, we followed the normal 80-20 split, with UK getting 80% and JMI taking 20% of the remainder. So I think this is really good and really bad. I think the good aspects of it are that it lets JMI tell everyone I mentioned before that, hey, we're giving 100% of your NIL deal to players. Like I said, good for all parties. It also incentivizes JMI to do a good job, because even though they're passing 100% of that on, they're taking their 20% commission in the end. They still get that. They also get their costs covered, which is great. So now that is what incentivizes JMI to do really well with the first part. The bad aspect of it, real quick, the only thing I don't like about it is that I think if you polled BBN United folks and said, where do you think your money's going? None of them would say, I think 20% is coming off the top to JMI, then I'm paying all JMI's expenses, then I'm paying 20% of the remainder to JMI. And I think they wouldn't know that, they wouldn't like that, and I think UK and JMI know that they wouldn't like that and are leaning on this being confusing and people not asking that question.
They're banking on the Catican not looking into it, baby.
Yeah.
But then, yes, my money I donate to the collective or to BBN United, it's not going directly to, Ortega Owe's pocket. I'm covering the bills of JMI and stuff. But in the long run, my payment is going to make more money for the players directly. So it's not like it's wasted money.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's also important to note that if you assume that UK is paying the maximum they can pay in rev share out to players, then this is really kind of coming out of UK's pocket. I mean, if this provision didn't exist and we weren't giving JMI this 20% out of this pool, well, then the money you give to BBN United is going to UK. So really, presumably they use that to rev share and it gets to players indirectly. So you can still think of it as indirectly paying the players. My only real complaint with the structure there is the lack of transparency.
Caleb, I believe you were going to have a question earlier.
No, yeah, I did have a question, but Raph pretty much asked it. So,
All right.
Same page.
So essentially, we traded out a formerly very straightforward model of we have a collective and they raise the money that the coaching staff or the athletic departments would utilize in order to pay these players. They're saying they brought it in-house, but we've essentially outsourced our NIL partnership, if I'm understanding correctly.
Well, I think the other kind of significant issue here is that when you had Club Blue, presumably their whole purpose for existing was not to make money, it was to land players. They could work as closely with the coaching staff as they wanted within the rules to, if the coaching staff says player 1 gets this much, player 2 gets this much, player 3 gets this much, player 4 gets this much, that works. And it seems like the coaching staff could just straight up negotiate themselves and then tell Club Blue how to allocate the money that they'd pooled. Now, and partially this is the rule change, but because each of these has to be a standalone deal that you're trying to justify to a regulator, you need a specific deal associated with every one of these payments, and you've got a profit-driven business in there negotiating kind of in between the player and the coaching staff, and they have their own interests, they have their own requirements and rules and goals, and in a lot of ways those goals are aligned with ours, but in some ways they're not. They want to protect their interest in a way. I mean, Club Blue doesn't care. Club Blue just wants the players to come here.
So what happens if a deal gets denied by the NIL Go mechanism, right? Deloitte says this isn't fair market value.
Yeah, well, I think
already signed, right?
I think a couple things. I think that they first give you an opportunity. I mean, you can arbitrate it. There's a whole arbitration process to determine whether they were right or not wrong. The whole thing gets reviewed. The players have the option to pay that money back and try again, rework it, figure out what the issue was. Or you could handle it like before. A player keeps the money. Now you have an ineligible player and you forfeit any games or vacate any games that they played in.
So is that truly what would happen though? Like, it does feel like this is a very mature model compared to like the Wild West of NIL, right? But there's also news articles where you have ADs talking to journalists saying like, oh, this NIL Go like mechanism is Bush League. It's taking too long. We have players and agents calling us all the time asking for their money, but it hasn't been approved, yada, yada. So we're just going to pay it out, right? And if they're doing that, it does seem like they know that they're not going to get all of their national championships vacated or something. So it feels like we're playing by a set of rules that are technically there. But like also people go 57 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone and nobody gets in trouble.
Well, yeah, I think it's tough to square that. Like it's in this era, you don't want to handcuff yourself in any way you don't have to, right? Like, I mean, money's the name of the game for a lot of these players. It's a huge motivator. All else being equal, they'll likely go to the school that's offering them more money or fewer restrictions or whatever. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't know what you do when schools are saying we know these are the rules and we're ignoring it. I mean, that's tough, right? Like, do I necessarily want Mitch to take that approach? Not publicly,
right?
I mean, how do you reconcile that? Like, it's maybe you can get away with it. And maybe that's a risk worth taking. I don't know. I'm sure opinions are varied on that, but it's also really, really tough to sit here and say my directive from my athletic director is to violate the damn rules that he probably more than anyone knows to be the rules because he was involved in making them. So I mean, I'm
commercials for the SCORE Act that we're supposed to legislate this into law instead of just NCAA rules that haven't had teeth in 10 years, right?
And I think the SCORE Act has its own issues, but I think as far as really being able to enforce this nationally, everyone plays by the same rules. It is important for that because force of law is big. Preempting contrary state laws is big. And giving the NCAA a limited antitrust exemption so that they can really enforce this is big. I mean, ultimately, all of these house settlement rules are untested. It can be an NCAA rule, but hell, so were all these other things that we've had to change as people have sued and courts have held that they're antitrust violations.
Counselor, I have a question. Two-parter. One is, why would Kentucky go into this in the first place? And two, what is the best case scenario from this before we get to the worst?
Well, Kentucky would go into this in the first place, because I think they think it'll work long term. The interests of the school and athletics aren't totally misaligned here. They both want it to work. Everyone does better when UK sports does better. That brings in more money to the school. We want it to succeed. But even if it doesn't succeed, this is a whole lot of money. Like, I mean, some athletic directors view their job as winning. Other athletic directors view their job as bringing in more money to the university through athletics. I don't know how Mitch views his job. I mean, obviously, all
Just
else
like
being
my
equal, I mean, obviously, all else being equal, you want to win. But really, bringing in money is huge. I mean, it's more scholarships, it's more buildings. I think our previous deal with JMI paid for the new science building on campus, which is huge and beautiful and brand new. I mean, so like there are benefits here. What was the other question? What's the best case scenario?
Yeah.
I mean, I do think this could work. I think, like I said, the incentives are aligned. JMI has every reason to want this to work. We're all pissed about people saying the NIL folks, the contract negotiations. That's why Collins is reopening his recruitment. That's terrible. That's an awful look. And people are asking, where does that stop? I mean, yeah, we're not happy with how freshman recruiting is going. But is football going to be better? Is Will Stein going to have this issue? Are we going to have this problem in the transfer portal? And all of that's a real question. I think the place where I am most optimistic about this relative to the conversations people are having is that my opinion is that we're screwed here until JMI gets better at making these contracts. And I think they will, because they want this money. They're getting their costs covered. They're getting their commission in the end. I mean, they want the biggest, best contracts that they can get, probably more than anyone other than the players. This is income for them. This is huge. So I think they'll get it together. I think that they're just inexperienced and new here. I just think that we've got a long way to go, and this is a bad deal until JMI improves, not a bad deal until 2040 when the deal expires.
I would say that they're incentivized to get the best players, so that way not only can they recoup their money, but they can actually profit off of it. So I don't feel like they're too interested in losing out on too many big-time recruits, because that will start spiraling. And they invested a ton of money into this, and corporations be corporating. I'm not thinking that they're too interested in taking a loss here. So they are directly monetarily invested into the success of Kentucky's athletics, maybe even more so than the Kentucky athletic department is, because they already got paid.
Oh, right. You're right. So I mean, when we talk about these guaranteed rights fees that they're paying us, and our new in our contract extension here, the deal already ran through 2033. They're paying us an extra like $14 million over that period anyway, that they wouldn't have had to. And I think we may have actually given up our 2025 payment before this. And if that's the case, they're paying us an extra like $25 million over that period that they wouldn't have had to. And then for the next 7 years, they're giving us $140 million more dollars. I mean, that's big. Those are the guarantees. That's before we get to this 80-20 split. That's before, so they've got a lot of costs they need to recoup that aren't included in that portion they take out of BBN United. I mean, they've got these guaranteed rights fees they've got to get covered first.
I have a question about the interests, right? Because JMI doesn't just do this for Kentucky. They do this for a lot of schools. And if this is something that they want to try and do for other schools that are maybe direct competitors in like a sports sense, well, how does the interest work out there, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. As far as I know, there's nothing in our contract that even addresses that. And then presumably it would if they ever had other people whose NIL they were negotiating. Like, obviously their goal is to get the biggest deal you can, but that's tough when you're trying to get different deals for the same player at different schools. I tend to think that it would work out in our favor. Like I said, we were their first ever media rights deal. I mean, we're their flagship school. They do a couple other big schools now, but I'm sure this is the biggest media rights deal they have. And I mean, we've done very well for JMI, and JMI has done very well for us in the past. For example, when the pandemic hit and revenue wasn't quite where we thought it would be, we gave them a temporary break and deferred the guaranteed rights payments they would owe us a little bit until there was revenue to cover it. JMI has also helped us quite a bit. When we were approaching this year, where rules changing post-house settlement, the whole deal with NIL before this season was that it all needed to be front-loaded. Any deal that was signed before the settlement was completed and paid out before July 1 wasn't subject to the new rules where it all has to be approved and all has to be fair market value and whatever, which means all of your NIL deals need to be front-loaded. And that's a lot of cash to just have. So the deal we made with JMI was, instead of our $12.5 million guaranteed rights fee you owe us, just agree to give us $12.5 million in NIL. So we just gave up that money to the university and got it from JMI. But they were willing to be flexible and say, okay, cool, yeah, we'll do that. And that, I mean, that's a big deal. And so I think having a partner like that's valuable. I just think they need to get their shit together and start landing guys. I think that, well, like any other, go ahead.
Just like getting their shit together, it's hard to know what that even means, but the speculation when you're losing a guy, it's like, what are you putting in the contract? Like, are you saying we will pay you this much in NIL unless it doesn't get approved by NIL Go, and then you have to forfeit it all, or you have to pay it back so that we don't lose our wins and losses? Or like, are they putting that kind of shit in the contract? Because, or are they saying, if you opt into us being your NIL provider, you can't do deals without it going through our management first, and like all this type of stuff, which doesn't really work for like top 5 type guys, right?
I assume it's the latter. Like I assume it's one JMI thinking they're buying more than the player's comfortable selling. Putting more strings. I mean, I'm sure that it's standard to have language handling what happens if stuff doesn't get approved by the CSC. Like, that's got to be normal. Everybody in the country, even third-party collectives, have to be dealing with that. I think it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to do anything other than see that players are responding poorly to it and see what Pilgrim and Polacek wrote in their On3 article, which the quotes are, JMI is asking for things that no other school in the country is asking for. That's what needs to change.
And there is no mechanism. JMI is a private company, so we can't FOIA. Did I say that right? We can't FOIA their stuff. Right. We can't FOIA these contracts that they have with players, which I think is probably good as like a general rule, because that would be insane. But also, and speculation.
It's also worth noting that we have no contracts at this point that we can FOIA. Right? Like we can't even see what they were asking for in these. So we don't know. That's all got to be speculation at this point until somebody from a player's camp comes forward and says.
And speculation is always great. Like, it's really good for PR, right?
I have a question about
very bad for UK's PR right now.
How much of that is self-inflicted, though?
Yeah,
not being forthcoming at all.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about the third-party deals and JMI stuff. So if the players are saying they don't like this extra stuff that JMI is putting in the contract, is the presumption then that the JMI guaranteed NIL value they're telling players is less than whatever they could make third-party? Or, like, why is that an issue? Because the players want money. Is JMI not ultimately offering the maximum amount of money?
Well, I think it's an issue because if you're going third party, you're on your own, and there's no entity that's going to sit there ahead of time with whom you're negotiating and say, here's what we can offer. I mean, say you're Christian Collins, you're on the West Coast, and you're trying to come here and figure out how much you can get paid to come here. It's real easy to, I mean, on your visit, probably you can go sit in JMI's office and hear a pitch from them. And that's going to be the pitch from the university's partners, the big ones that advertise at Rupp Arena, the big ones that advertise at Kroger Field, you know, that's probably who JMI is going to pitch you first. And they can say, hey, if you want a third-party deal, great, go for it. Well, then what? You know, with Club Blue, it was easy. Anyone could come to them. JMI's got this small list of partners. And hopefully those are big dollar partners that are able to make really good deals. But, like, if you want to do a deal with, I don't know. I mean, anyone who's not part of this JMI group, anyone who's not going to be paying through JMI, great, go find them. You live in California. How even do you solicit offers? Like, hey, I'm considering coming to UK. Who wants to do an NIL deal with me? Like that. I think just logistically, it's a challenge to figure out what third-party options there are. And certainly there isn't a great way to real quick in the recruiting process say, this is the amount of money that we're going to be able to offer you third-party. There just is no entity that can do that. And there can't be, because UK can't have another company doing NIL services.
Another thing, though, with top 20 guys in basketball recruiting specifically on AAU circuits that are already Nike kids, that are already Adidas kids, that are already Croc kids, they have all of this stuff going on in high school, right? What happens when they get to the negotiation table with JMI and they already have all of these like commitments for name, image, likeness, and they don't want that muddied at all? But JMI is saying you can come here for $3 million or whatever, which is the highest offer you're going to get, but also blah, 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 that messes with their other money, right? Or messes with their ability to keep managing those types of connections during their time at UK.
I think sort of in the same way that like rev share and NIL are now getting conflated by people who aren't precise when they're describing it. You know, oh, we're playing whatever player, how much to come here? Well, how much of that is NIL? How much of that is rev share? They're different. They have different rules. Some can come from the university with absolutely no strings attached. The rest has to get approved. Yeah, I mean, they're different, but people don't talk about them differently. This is the amount the player was offered. I think that people did that last year with Cooper Flagg. They took, he got $27 million. Well, cool. 3/4 of that was in a Fanatics deal that's going to, go for the next 5 years. And it's the total value of that deal. And none of that was contingent on him going to Duke. Debanza has the same thing. He's got a Red Bull deal. He's got a Nike deal. He's got all these deals, but those aren't necessarily the recruiting NIL. That's not stuff that lured him to BYU. That's a separate number that he is getting paid at BYU. That's then itself split up into rev share and NIL. And so the Nike deals may be different because we have our own deal with Nike. Maybe those can use the logo. But like if you're a Crocs guy, you can be a Crocs guy here as long as that doesn't conflict with Nike, I guess. But you probably can't use a UK logo. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe JMI is being too restrictive about other things, and that's a problem. It certainly would be if
Cooper Flagg signed that New Balance deal while he was at Duke, right? What happens, say, a player who has a deal with JMI through whatever mechanisms they decided on, and they're playing at Kentucky, and JMI doesn't have a relationship with New Balance, right? How intertwined with the players' representation and the players' acts is JMI when they sign a recruit to some contract, right? And is that you speculate?
I think that's a concern. I think that concerns like that have to be the issue. It has to mean I'm sure that JMI is able to get big deals. We've got big brands. It doesn't sound like the guaranteed amount is the problem that we're having. It sounds like the language that we have. It sounds like an issue of we're putting something in our contracts that the players don't want to see or don't want to agree to, that other schools aren't putting in their contracts. That's what I think needs to get fixed. I don't know. And I think that's one where it's going to be difficult to know. Like, we can analyze Kentucky and JMI's contract. We can't analyze every player's individual contracts with their own third-party people, and we can't analyze the players' contracts with JMI.
Yeah. What is rev share?
All right.
And where does that money come from?
As part of the House settlement, every school is permitted to spend up to, in year one, the number was $22.5 million on roster building from the school's own budget, totally pay for play. I mean, UK can say, Tyron Stokes, here is, some amount of money. Yeah, right. But that comes from the university, right? And it comes the entire athletic department. So any money you're spending on basketball, you're not spending on football. And it's not enough, honestly. I mean, football rosters alone are that much. One basketball program alone is that much. And so you've got to figure, I mean, every school is allocating it differently. Most schools are doing like 75% football. But it's up to the, I mean, if you're a Big East school that doesn't have football, you can really spend a lot of that money on basketball. The issue is, because it comes from the university's own pocket, if you don't have a big SEC media deal paying you a lot of money for football, like these Big East schools don't, you've got to come up with that yourself. You just got to, it comes out of your budget. And so that number
I was hoping you would say that it would be a percentage of the revenue of it, and I was gonna be like, oh, then this JMI deal would be freaking sweet if it were broken down percentage rather than capped at an amount.
Yeah, we're capped.
So, yes and no, and not in the way you want. They get to that $22.5 million because, or no, actually $20.5 million. They get to that $20.5 million in year one because that represents 22% of the average power conference plus Notre Dame's sports revenue.
Communism.
And so that number, that 20.5 goes up every year by 4%. It's recalculated based on whatever 22% is every 3 years. But the first $2.5 million in new scholarships you give that weren't permitted last year count against you, count against your cap there too. So last year's $20.5 million was actually $18 million for us because we added more than $2.5 million in new scholarships.
Okay. I think that finishes up my questions, unless Raph or Caleb, you guys have any more questions you want to pepper Ben with before we call it?
The contract language issue that they're having right now is not something that's insurmountable, right? And it's in everyone's best interest for that to work out. Right? Like, this is a fixable thing.
That's what gives me the most optimism. It is in JMI's best interest to get this worked out. Like, JMI wants these deals to be as big, as numerous as, they want as many and as much money to move through them as possible because they are getting a commission on the back end. So yeah, they want to come to terms with these players. They want to land these players. They want these players to have big, lucrative deals. Not only is it in their best interest to get the deal done, they want it to be as big as possible. That's good. They just need to figure it out.
the language of the contracts, this isn't an issue due to the deal between JMI and UK as to why we can't get players. This is strictly an issue between JMI and the player itself and their negotiation. So I think the best thing that we can do as fans is publicly, like what Caleb was saying, maybe not to that extent, is publicly apply pressure to JMI for loosening up a negotiating table, right?
Right. I'm sure Mitch doesn't want to throw JMI under the bus. Like, I know that he's been on a radio tour and TV tour, even somewhat ironically with some JMI programs, which is maybe not the platform we should be using for these Let's Defend JMI talks. But
come on the show, Mitch. Come on. Do it.
Yes, dude. I'd love to have a real discussion with him about were you relying on score act passing? Did you think that collectives were still going to be able to operate? How do you? I mean, I know what I think this could turn into positively. Like, I think that the ceiling is the roof, but I think that I want to know what he thinks the upside of this is. Surely that came up in his negotiations with them. I know how good it is for the university. I just, I also want to know what kind of pressure he's applying to them. Obviously, he wants this to be good because 80% of what's left after their cut goes to the university. He wants this to be lucrative too. So come tell us, Mitch.
It is particularly frustrating that with losing Collins and maybe Stokes as well, is that Pope is going to have to be the one publicly wearing these L's when he's the one who brought the kid to the negotiating table, and it's JMI dropping the ball there. And recruiting is all trust. So I think the solution here is you either got to get JMI way more out of it or have JMI way more involved. You can't do this half measure stuff that I would assume is what's happening here, because why would it get that far and then break down?
Right. And JMI as an entity is very successful, right? Like, they make a lot of money, but they do that with business to business relationships that are so much different than university to insanely talented kid who everybody is trying to get a cut off of and surrounded by agents or family or whatever. And that is going to take like some learning, but they better do it really freaking fast, because you have a high school. We already missed the early signing period. You have high school recruiting. All of these players are going to want to kind of be wrapped up before the transfer portal opens. And then you have a short little transfer portal window in which this works. I think that JMI is probably crushing it with mid-tier players, mid-tier market players. But when it comes to the Yaxels, you have a very short amount of time to be successful. And that's the expectation is for Kentucky to be a top 1 or 2 recruiting class. And that means getting players that are probably not easy, not nearly the same as getting a deal with Kroger, right? So
I do wonder if we were to appoint some sort of GM, if it would be smarter to have that on the JMI side or on the UK side.
Well, I think a couple things. I think first, some people are proposing a GM as the solution to this issue. I don't think that's the case. I mean, if we get a GM, even if they have their own opinions that are different from Pope's, they're still going to go and tell JMI, and JMI may consider that and may not. Our GM is not going to dictate to JMI or their partners what their contract language says. It's not that. This goes back to the issue is not UK's contract with JMI, it's JMI's potential contracts with their partners and these players. And I don't think a GM, as much as it might be helpful for roster building purposes, I don't think a GM necessarily solves this issue. And likewise, if you put a GM, for all we know, JMI has a GM. Maybe they have their own opinions about what players they want. I haven't heard anything that would make me think that's the case.
That would be
But
awful.
still, if yeah, right. I don't like that at all. But still, if it's their business people that are having this issue connecting or negotiating with these players or their representation, then I don't know that a GM helps there either.
I think there is a solution that could publicly save face and actually help, and that is for JMI to appoint a person that's in charge of NIL that has worked at Clutch or has worked at one of these collectives that's brokered 500 freaking deals, that has executed contracts between high-profile athletes and university interests, and that would help. But the thing is, another thing with business-to-business relationships versus business-to-celebrity relationships, Clutch, you can go and you can find out all kinds of stuff about their people, right, that are there, because it's very public-facing. JMI is not like that. You have a lady who got appointed as vice president of NIL that you can maybe find like her Facebook page or something, but there isn't this like operating in public business space type of this environment like sports marketing people do. And,
right. Well, I think that's a good point, because as sort of the go-between between these businesses and the school and the players, JMI is part of their job is serving as like a marketing agency for the players, right? Like if you, as part of this, you've got to be pitching the player to the business just as much as you're pitching these deals to the players. And so experience in that space, I think, would be huge. Like you said, it's very different if you're a business executive negotiating with the head of Kroger's marketing company. You kind of have a baseline understanding of what deals are good in your space. You have some learned etiquette, probably. I mean, a lot of shared language when you're dealing with another business person that you may not have in common with a player, or I don't know anything about his representation. He's a top 5 guy. I assume it's good, but a lot of these people have like friends or uncles or whatever as their agent, making 25% of what, I mean, and you just might be on different footing when you're negotiating with those parties than you are with sophisticated marketing people with an advertising budget that are used to negotiating with you like this.
Right. And
I think what would go up. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, there's just, it's so much different. And it's like we need JMI to be a little bit Hollywood. And that's just not what they are historically. But I think all that takes is building the right team, right?
Right. I think that's
I do think that transparency would go a long way, even if we were quote unquote whiffing on these players. If we just had a name of someone that we as a fan base could blame for this, that would go a long way for us. And I do like the Hollywood argument. I don't think Jeremy Piven is busy. Maybe we do some sort of like Ari Gold type deal with him as just he's like a figurehead over this. I don't know. I'm just trying to do a bit there.
I like that.
I think that the JMI deal could work because I think that we are going to start experiencing booster fatigue or booster burnout, where they're going to get sick of constantly donating money. I think it looks bad right now, but we may just, we would just keep tapping that Joe Kraft well dry, to where this seems more sustainable in the long run than constantly going to the Kraft.
Well, one thing I haven't mentioned that does concern me is that for fans, especially the big money boosters who have money that they want to get into the hands of players as a recruiting mechanism, I don't know where they put their money now. Like I don't know how you do that. Like I don't necessarily think the best use of that is to contribute it to one of these loyalty fan groups that essentially goes to paying JMI. I mean, if
Ben,
you've
you
got
can get a
three,
signed towel, dude. You don't want a signed towel?
and credit to BBN United, they do all of these things that I had been begging Club Blue to do for years. It's stuff that other collectives do that adds some value, lets you feel some appreciation beyond, cool, thanks, this player's going to come here now. Obviously, that's the goal. You're doing it because you want the player, but having opportunities. I mean, this week they're Zooming with the players. You know, someone said they've got a Zoom schedule with Colin Chandler. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. They got an invite to a practice. That's stuff that I wish that we could have done under Club Blue to really add some value separate from the we just paid the player. And then that's good. But like I said, I don't think if you're a $3 million a year donor to the basketball program and you want that to get into the hands of players, I just don't know what you do. We don't have a good answer for that at this point. If you're a small Big East fan where you're not spending at the rev share cap, this is easy. You can donate to the university and they can just spend that out of their rev share. But they can now they have the money to spend at a higher rate. But because we're already spending at that cap, that's not really a benefit to us either. Giving it to the university is not helpful. Giving it to JMI doesn't seem helpful if that's not going to help players land better deals. I just don't know what you do.
I especially don't think that people are going to be interested in donating money to JMI.
Right. You're right.
As soon as that gets more public.
I think JMI is going to have to set something up. That's like a Kentucky fan experience, whatever. And they can make their own rules a little bit on fair market value, yada. Like there's going to be mechanisms to work around on that because rich people, if they want to spend their money, somebody's going to figure out a way to let them do it. And I just think it's going to end up going through JMI rather than like some hastily thrown together nonprofit that is a pay for play type thing. So I think they will end up doing something like that, and they're going to have to, like you said, because rev share isn't enough to maintain the roster constructions that we need to be competitive in the SEC. But I think that the way that this deal is set up, it's made it to where JMI is going to have to be the ones who actually do that.
I do want to give Mitch and JMI both some credit. I think that this agreement we have, the structure we have set up that allows the players to get paid with no commission coming out, allows the university to continue maximizing their rev share, and also allows JMI to get their costs covered and get their commission paid. I think it's really creative. I was really impressed with the structure of it. I didn't at all expect it to be like that. And so because of that, I'm optimistic that when it comes to working within the bounds of the rules that we have, I think that, hopefully we can continue to be creative and come up with good solutions that work. Maybe we come up with something if we don't, if the enforcement mechanism of the NCAA is ineffective, maybe we can use that as an opportunity to come up with another structure in addition to this that helps us get players paid on top. I think we have good minds working on this stuff. The contract is good and creative and unique. We didn't just copy someone else's homework here. I think we just need to be flexible. I think as the rules change, one of the scary things is, hey, this is a 15-year agreement. Rules have changed every year for like the last 5 years and don't show any sign of stopping that. Can we be flexible enough to handle this? And I think you've got to. And I think it's in everyone's best interest to.
And I think that it's all going to kind of be in JMI's hands, right? So the pressure doesn't get put on the athletic department anymore. It gets put on JMI, which is different, right? It's hard to yell at nebulous corporation rather than like adding Mitch Barnhart on Twitter. Yeah. But yeah, I do think that this is something that other schools are going to copy because it does seem like the only viable model that I've actually seen that doesn't look like it could get just picked apart because of whatever. It seems flexible. It's just like JMI is going to have to get their shit together when it comes to getting these Hollywood recruits. And maybe that requires expanding that business sector a little bit. That vertical in JMI needs to go away from getting deals with Kroger and sharing data analytics back and forth to high stakes visits to Vegas with Uncle Benny or whatever.
It's not a good answer at all to say, hey, we're in the opening months of this new exciting agreement. Recruiting's off to a disappointing start. We've landed nobody under contract language scares people away, and this is our answer. That's a terrible answer. You know what else is a bad answer? We have no ideas, and so we're just going to cheat because we don't know if the NCAA can enforce it. That's what other schools are relying on at this point, right? Like, that's not a good answer either. So at least we have a structure that in theory could work within the bounds of the rules. And like I said, I mean, I think that there's lots of room for optimism here. But again, they need to get this figured out. They need to land players. They just have to, both for our sake and their sake.
You're muted, Jared.
Our big video, and I ruined it. Why won't it let me do this? It keeps opening to a new tab on me. No.
How embarrassing.
It did look like the University of Utah entered into a deal where it's at Utah. Utah Brands Entertainment is expected to oversee functions such as corporate sponsorships, ticketing, and trademarks and licenses. So it looks like they're doing something similar. They also, I believe, did some sort of private equity deal, which sounds very similar to what we were doing with the LLC before we struck up a deal with JMI. Coincidentally, I do believe Utah is also a JMI school.
Utah is a JMI school. I think their private equity thing is very different.
Okay.
I think it does also involve creation of a separate entity. But I think it's very different from this, and sort of like Matt Jones, that's about as into it as I can get in my description. It's just different. That's not the kind of relationship we have with them. They are also a JMI school.
I think that the private equity thing is something we don't want to do. We will never want to do because it's going to. Utah sold themselves as a brand to a private equity company, and if you've worked in those types of environments, you know that means that you lose all control of everything, and it can either work out great because the private equity company is actually good at their job, or you can be completely screwed. And I think Utah is trying to compete with BYU, and that is, Utah's a pretty unique situation, I think, but the whole like selling out to private equity is selling out to private equity. And with JMI, we are a lot more on like a level partnering type of relationship.
If anything, I think we come out on top between.
We are the dom, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about exclusivity, polyamorous relationships, and whatnot today. And we don't want to sell out to private equity. We don't want Saudi money, right? Like, we need to keep our.
We here at the Catican.
At Catican, we will sell out. Absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
To JMI, to the Saudis, to whoever
the
private equity company is.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note, and I think we did this in an earlier podcast. If you work at JMI and you're watching this and you want us to not report about you in this way, we take bribes. We are happy to accept your money to shut up.
Our Venmos will be in the description below. Click on that.
I got banned on Venmo.
Happens to the best of us.
I don't even remember why. I think I put too many bank accounts on there or something.
that is all of the NIL stuff that I had. Did you guys have anything else? All right.
This was
everybody,
very-
thank you. Yeah, this is very informative.
If you have questions, put them in the comments. I mean,
we'll do a part 2.
I've
Then we'll address your questions in part 2.
We could do a live and take audience questions.
That sounds good. All right, we'll do it Christmas Day. How's that sound, guys? Are you guys busy on Christmas? Or?
Nope. I'm off work that day.
I have to work till noon. I'm Santa Claus.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining the Catican. For Raph, for Kale, for Ben, I'm Jared. Go Cats.
Go Cats. Also,
Go Cats.
like, subscribe, turn notifications on.
Send
Also,
Venmos.
Hit the hype. That's a new feature on there.
Yeah.
Let's do a little bit of that. Let's do a little bit of hyping.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Go Cats and go JMI.
Go JMI.
Go JMI.
Go JMI.